Vice President, Iran Chamber of Commerce, Industries, Mines and Agriculture, and Vice President of CACCI. Dr. Pedram Sultani. Mr. Ashish Gopal, Managing Director, Marico Bangladesh Limited. Now I would like to turn over the floor to Mr. Pradeep Kumar Sreshta, CACCI Vice President, former President of FNCCI.
A very late good afternoon. I think after a long full day session, I know to keep you all holding here in this session will be a very, very difficult task for all of us. The whole day, the deliberation has been so interesting. Now, I will leave it to the panelists to make it more interesting than what they have done in the previous session, so that you all go back with a very good some enlightened deliberation from all the panelists. The session that I'm told to be chairing is, of course, the pursuit of equitable and sustainable growth. But before I go to introduce the panelists, I must thank ABCCI, the organizing team, president, and the whole members for having all of us here. The way this deliberation has been done from the day one, from welcome dinner to the inauguration this morning, and the very two previous session has been very, very enlightening. And I'm sure every members who have attended will go back with the very fond memories and something new to carry home and tell their friends and family that the program of CACCI, 33rd CACCI conference in Bangladesh was worth, and tell them also what they missed also in Bangladesh, I am Pradeep Srestha. I am the past president of the Federation and now the vice president of the CACCI. So I think I also need to be introduced to you, I'm from Nepal, a landlocked country. And I say we have been sandwiched between India and China, But I say we are the cream of the sandwich. We are the cheese of the sandwich, So you have to also know what country I come from, what advantages we have in our country. This morning I was trying to say, but the time given was so limited that I could not share what I wanted to share, Anyway, but the potential of hydropower, tourism, and the agriculture sector is so high that those who are not visited Nepal, 2020 is our Visit Nepal year, so please do come to Nepal. We like to show you and make you see what Nepal can offer. This session is a very, very interesting session, And we have five prominent learned speakers. And some are doctors, some are very, very experienced. And I don't need to, curtail them with the timings because we are already much ahead of what we should have started. We should have started by 5 o'clock. Now it is already 5:30, 5:35. So I was supposed to be finishing the session by 6, actually, but I don't know whether it is possible or not. No, I mean 6:30. So I will try to limit I request the speakers to limit their presentation, make it short and sweet so that we have little bit of time for the questions, And at least from the audience, should there be any question, I think we can also share on that. So I would like to introduce, to save time, I'm going to introduce all the speakers myself, a very, very short speaker. And should they need to add more, probably they can do that also. The first speaker, Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, who is also a very prominent personality in Bangladesh, and he also is the principal coordinator for SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal Affairs to the Honorable Prime Minister Office of Bangladesh. So his presentation will certainly let us know the subject that he's going to touch on. The next, of course, is Dr. Pai Pu Lee. He is from Taiwan, and he is the Secretary General of International Cooperation Development Fund of Taiwan. The details are already there with you so I don't want to linger with the introduction. The third speaker on the very right is Ragnar Gudmortsson. He is resident representative in Bangladesh for the International Monetary Fund. So I'm sure he'll be one where their institution could help the growth, development, and bring prosperity in this region. And to my immediate right, he is Dr. Pedran Soltani from Iran, who also happens to be the Vice President of CACCI and the first Vice President of Iran Chamber. We'll be looking forward to hear from him, his Iranian experience, and touching the subject that we are going to discuss on. And to my very far left, Mr. Ashish Gopal, who is Managing Director of Marico Bangladesh Limited, which is, I think, F&D company, coming up very, very fast. And he also export to a lot of countries with his base also in India. So not taking much of the time, so I will first of all request Mr. Abdul Kalam Azad to do his presentation, and I will limit him for being a very senior man. 10 minutes is enough, sir?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. So you are with Nepal. So Honorable Prime Minister sent a huge quantity of rice when earthquake was there. As a scout, I sent my scout team for the rescue operation in Nepal. You are sandwiched, but we want to support you in between China and India. So always our Prime Minister extends her cooperation for the landlocked country like Nepal and Bhutan. So thank you for your nice introduction. The topic is very interesting. The equitable and sustainable growth. This is the main theme of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. And you all know, SDG says, no one left behind. So, the no one left behind and the topic of today's discussion is the same. I will limit my discussion on the issues, especially in education, health, agriculture, industry, social safety net, and if any other time permits. If we look into the growth of Bangladesh in last 10 years, our GDP, it's multiplied 3.5 times. And our annual development program, ADP, is 7 times. So this cannot be imagined in any of the country. So the political leadership is the basis for that. And that made the social structure. If I look into the education, you see, on the first day of the year, 1st of January, last year, see, about 360 million copy of books were distributed free. 360 million from class 1 to class 12. So all these students get new books every year. So I used to tell to the students nowadays that I feel very angry with them. Because during my childhood, I believe the Bangladeshi, they will bear me out, that we could get at least at best 1, 2 or 3 books new. All we used to collect old books and read that for that year. But now, all these students, they get new books. We took one book, kept beside my pillow in the night. In the night when sleep was broken, we took the smell of the new books. But now all these boys and girls, they are getting new books. Only not for the general student. If they are impaired student, the blind students, they used to get last year 8,000 Braille books. We provided them talking books so that he can press button and a specific topic he or she will hear. For these students, in primary school, all these students, they get a special stipend, and especially the girls. And this small amount of money is sent to their mother through their mobile phone. Not only the primary school, in high school, the girls, they have their free education. So this made a miracle. If you go to schools, primary school, high school, and even university, the presence of the girls is much more. Obviously, in primary school, high school is about 52-53% girls. In university, also about 30%. If you look into the medical education, recruitment of doctors, more than 50% are female. So this gave us encouragement how to bring the women forward. Food supplement. In primary school and high school also, food supplement, midday meal, all these are arranged from the government, and some of them from the locality, from the mothers, from the guardians. In some places where we could not provide the midday meal, local administration, they distributed tiffin box. This tiffin box encourages the mother to put the tiffin every day in that box, so that when his or her kid come to school, they carry some tiffin from their home. In this way, we are trying to encourage all these students so that the duration in school is much more longer. The students, they don't absent in the schools, and we have successive examination system after class 5, after class 10, after class 8, after class 10, and so on. If we look into the climate vulnerables, so many steps we have taken to cope up with this situation, and Bangladesh is the single country, those who have their own climate change trust fund, which we did in 2009, and about $500 million we spent from our own exchequer. In the garment sector, if you see, some of the partners from here, from the garment sector, you will find out of 10 lead garments factory in the globe, 7 are from Bangladesh. Wherever we used to discuss about the climate vulnerability, whenever we discuss about the standard of manufacturing, sometimes Bangladesh, by some of the country, being tried to make malign. But you see, out of 10 lead factories, 7 are from Bangladesh. In public health, government used to have a target to spend 5% of its budget, in education 15%, and also in social protection 15% of its GDP we want to spend for, which will bring the backward people on the same line with others. If you look into the social safety net, currently about 29% of our population are under social safety net, with a target to bring 40% by 2030 under social safety net program. So what are these social safety nets? The widows, the old people, freedom fighters, the vulnerable poor people, the people, those who are being displaced by the river erosion. So 40% we have a target so that they can be brought under the social safety net program. 100 economic zone, not in one place, distributed all over the country, so that we can have the job opportunity. In next 10 years, we want to have 15 million job opportunity. If it is distributed all over the country, so agro products will be much more encouraged, so that in this economic zone, we can add value for export. We have a land bank of 50,000 acres. We are trying to have another 50,000 acre. This will be brought under the purview of the Bangladesh Economic Zones Authority very soon. Investment climate. We are trying to have the one-stop service, OSS. A law has been passed, or in the meantime, our economic zone and our investment development authority, they established their one-stop service center, and by that we have started providing the one-stop service from those centers. For the new investors, entrepreneurs, startup, for the first time in our country, 100 crore taka. This is specially allocated for the entrepreneurs from 1 crore to 5 crore taka. But this fund, as government allocated for the first time, this is not limited to 100 crore taka. This will be much more as per the necessity of the country. If you consider our SDG, 928 billion extra is required. We believe from the skill development and from the blue economy, from the vast ocean which we got through a legal battle from Myanmar and India, I believe these two areas will encourage us for these extra 928 billion. You all know Bangladesh is graduating from LDC. In the meantime, last year, it is recommended first time for LDC graduation. Year after next year, we will have the second recommendation, and we believe by 2024, we will be graduated from LDC. This will put us a huge challenge, but always we used to say that if one door is closed, we want to open 100 doors, so that the opportunity will not be lessened, but this will be increased in multiple fold. We used to work with South-South cooperation. From Bangladesh, we used to provide so many cooperation for different South countries. In terms of SDG, we have one SDG tracker. This enables any policy decision maker with a finger of his tips, he or she can understand where Bangladesh is in terms of implementation of SDG. This software we are sharing with different countries. If anyone, you can see in our website, and we used to share this with different countries. So South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, we work and we extend our support to all of you. So we believe with remittance, especially we are working for the remittance sender, the family, those who get the remittance, how to utilize this money for their better livelihood. I believe with all this, the target of our GDP growth is double digit in the next decade. Day before yesterday, Honorable Prime Minister discussed about the strategic plan 2021 to 2041. So a 20-year strategic plan Bangladesh is going to finalize in a couple of months. And this is another information for the global participants that Bangladesh, this is the single country, those who have a long-term visionary plan 2100 Delta plan, where Bangladesh needs to go. So our successive plan steer is by 2021 we want to be a higher middle income country. 2030 we want to implement the SDG. 2041 we want to be one of the developed country. 2071 this is 100 years of Bangladesh, and 2100 is the Delta plan. I believe Bangladesh will be a leading country in the implementation of SDG and also the equitable and sustainable growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I just gave him 2-3 minutes extra, I have to respect his position also. But for others, I'm sure they're going to agree on me and respecting the time. Now, of course, I have Leap. He is also a doctor, Leap. He has a long experience of maybe more than two decades. And please go ahead with your presentation, sir.
Thank you. Chairman. So, the Taiwan ICDF, the full name is the International Cooperation and Development Fund. It's the functional carrier like the Japan, JICA, or the Korea, the COICA. So it's a very great honor for me to present the topic together for an equitable and sustainable future Taiwan ICDF effort in the Asia and Pacific. There are 5 major parts: global sustainable development reality, secondary role of official development assistance, the number 3, the realization of the equitable and sustainable future, including the regional strategies and practical cases. Also the number 4, partner for sustainable future, enhancing the variety of the partnership, also call for the PPP. That's final one, the conclusion. Sorry. No accent. What? No? Sorry. Unpacked. Can I see? Yeah.
You have the other one to, I think the battery must be weak.
PPT. No?
So laptop থেকে support করেন আপনারা? Please.
Okay, yeah.
Next slide.
Okay, next slide. Okay. So the reality here, according to the UN statistic, in year 2013, for the poverty reduction, little bit decline compared to the before. In terms of the malnutrition, A21 in year 2017 compared to the 2015 still declines. And 7 million deaths because of the air pollution. Although the women's the 3 times more hours a day is because of the gender-based socio-economic disadvantage. And the 11.2, the solid waste. So all of that, the statistic could be harmful to the global development. Based on that, the statistics, some is the positive progress. For instance, the equity, also the quality education, and the clean energy. But some could be less than that. For instance, health, others. So I have to make the progress. In terms of the ODA from ICDF, we provide to helping the global society through, the strategic alliance. Here is history. Since 1959, there were 60 years. The organization evolution in 1996 is a formally established of this organization. So we provide the technology, also the financial services, human capital to join the Taiwan competitive advantage, responding to the partner needs, also integrate public-private sector resources, and strengthen the competitive the partnership one. There are 5 major core sectors, including the agriculture, the food security of the rural development, environment, climate change, CO2 concentration, marine sustainability, public health and medicine for the health promotion and education, the capacity building, the ICT for the good governance. Here is a map, according to the SDG, the general strategy is cover the five major goals. Goal 2, 3, 4, 8, and 17. If in the Asian country is will additional 8, 12, 13, and the 15. In Asia and Pacific, in terms of development issue, for instance, food insecurity, malnutrition, economic recession, also the declines of use of renewable energy, disparity of quality of education across the region, insufficient action for environmental protection. So here is regional in the Asia Pacific. We will to make some program implementation, sustainable agriculture, food security, nutrition part. Also the economic goals, the SME incubation, and the household income increase, and the human capital development, including that the education, formal education, the higher education system, non-formal and informal education. Later I will to give more. In the some cases I like to take here for your reference. In the nutrition part, the Palau Island, we have the horticulture programs. These are the for vegetable production, on the first stage, but after that, for the nutrition, from the seeding, also the compost, after that the nutrition provide for the local people. Same in the Marshall Island, use this same idea for the food security and sustainable, the livelihood food. Also in the PNG, Papua New Guinea also have the same programs. In agribusiness in Indonesia, we have the small and mini and also the agribusiness in Bandung. Here is where we set up the greenhouse, also the packaging, shipping houses, also to give the assistance for the farmer, grouper, the cooperative. Also the the training center for local people, the digital appliance of the app for the mobile phone. Here is the energy part, equitable access to the energy. The loan programs in Marshall Island have the two dimensions. One, energy efficiency sub-loan will be focused on the energy saving appliance. Second one, to provide the solar panel for renewable energy sub-loans is also the this very useful. Same like the TA technical assistance in Myanmar. We use this one to help the local village. There's a village in the after sunset is become dark because of this PV panel system to help local people distribute LED light bulbs, not only for the household, but also for the public schools, temple, and so on. Same, these are the pilot projects expand to the second stage is coming from the Taiwanese local enterprises to engage this one. In terms of the education part, we give the professional workshop every year. Taiwan will conduct 16 or 18 professional workshops to help Pacific and the Asian, particularly Southeast Asian country, in the South Asian country, the total 1,800. Vocational training for practical skill for local people. Also the higher education to provide the PhD, master, and undergraduate for the quality manpower cultivation. Also the healthcare personnel training is an on-the-job training system. Here, that's the according to the OECD, every year have spent 3.3 to 4.5 trillion the years about the money, but the ODA is only take about 3.6%. So the ODA very important, but not efficiency. So how to the variety of the partnership, also the PPP collaboration. in bilateral system with US, Japan, also Australia, and the multilateral organization, and the international organization, and the international INGO. Also the PPP1 from this statistic, for instance, 12 trillion for the private sector, 1 billion for the global smart agriculture or precision agriculture. The energy part, also the 2 trillion. The other one, also the other sector will provide this one. So the business matching forums from ICT, we also to introduce the business into the cooperating country for the business opportunity. So finally, the conclusion I like to, to introduce for you that the equitable and sustainable growth is still the key point of the SDG implementation. In the regional grouping in Asia Pacific region and the world, still very expanding, that the impact of this SDG implementation. But the most important, the private sector, particularly for foreign direct investment, is the one of important part for the private sector development. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Now going to the third panelist, our speaker is Mr. Ragnar Rudmotson. He is from IMF. He's a resident representative in Bangladesh.
Okay, good evening. Maybe we can put up my presentation. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, to this gathering and to contribute to a session which covers several important challenges, from the need for inclusive growth and job creation to the objective of meeting the SDGs, and also the urgency of addressing climate change. As I cannot cover each of these topics in depth, what I will try to do in my allotted time is just to highlight some of the key messages coming from a recent research and analysis done by the IMF. So first of all, let me briefly summarize some of the main economic developments that we see on the horizon for the region. Okay. So what we observe, first of all, is that while Asia Pacific is still the world's fastest growing major region, contributing more than 2/3 to global growth, near-term prospects have deteriorated noticeably over the last 6 months. Growth in Asia is now expected to moderate to 5% in 2019 and 5.1% in 2020. And what's interesting is that this would constitute the slowest expansion of the region since the global financial crisis in 2008. As you probably know, the headwinds stem from prolonged global policy uncertainty, distortionary trade measures, and growth deceleration in the economies of important trading partners in the region. A major contributor to this uncertainty has been the trade tensions between the US and China and the tariff escalation that has taken place since 2018. And you can see this illustrated on the right-hand side of the chart. So really the deterioration in the trade relations between the US and China have had a major impact not only on the trade relations between those two major powers, but for the global economy as a whole. And Asia has notably suffered from a marked deceleration in merchandise trade and investment, and this has been weighing on economic activity, particularly in the manufacturing sector. So exports in Asian emerging markets have been shrinking since late 2018, and this has been largely dragged down by weak intra-regional trade, especially with China. In China, GDP growth slowed to 6.2% last year. It's 6.2% year over year in the second quarter of this year. And our high-frequency indicators all point to a continued deceleration in economic activity, So the trend that we saw at the end of the first half of this year is being continued in July and August. And this kind of slowdown and these tensions are reflected in the business sentiment that we see both in the US and in China. So what we also see, what's very important, is the extent to which these trade tensions have an impact on the financial markets. What we see is that following a tightening in conditions through the first quarter of 2019, financial conditions for Asian emerging market economies have eased since April 2019, and capital flows to the region have been robust. So this is let's say, a positive trend for the region in a difficult global environment. However, as you can see in the right side chart, capital flows to the region reversed once more over the last 2 months following the announcement of some follow-up trade escalation, tariff escalation measures. So overall, while financial conditions appear set to remain accommodative over the coming year, we must be careful that an abrupt change in financing conditions and a change in the global appetite for risk could lead to a tightening of financial conditions and a reversal of capital flows, and that could lead to a further slowdown in growth for the region. So what does this mean looking forward? What this means is that in this uncertain global environment, we need to focus on policies that are aimed at buffering this slowdown where necessary, strengthening resilience to growing downside risks, and also raising inclusive medium-term growth. On the fiscal side, fiscal policy should support domestic demand in countries where this is needed and where there is fiscal space. Monetary policy should generally remain accommodative and calibrated to local circumstances, and financial sector policies should be strengthened as needed to ensure that the accommodative monetary policy that we are witnessing does not lead to a build-up of financial stability risks. Moreover, and this is more from a medium-term perspective, structural policies really need to lay the groundwork for strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth over the medium term. How do we achieve that? First of all, further trade integration, including in services, along with product and labor market reforms, would not only help offset the demand shock from slower global trade, but also facilitate the adjustment to realigning global supply chains. Revamping infrastructure, enhancing regulatory frameworks, and further opening the private services sector to investment could also help raise potential growth. Finally, countries should focus on policies that incentivize lower greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon taxes or emission trading systems, and on building fiscal buffers for meeting the growing financial needs to adapt to climate change and the increasing incidence of natural disasters. We know that there are several countries in the region that are particularly vulnerable to natural disasters, including Bangladesh, including Sri Lanka, including the Maldives, the Philippines, and these countries need to generate the financial resources to invest in adaptation strategies. So when we talk of equitable and sustainable growth, one of the main challenges for policymakers is to create an environment that's conducive to new and productive jobs for the labor force. And the challenges that we see for the Asia region are quite different according to which subset of countries you're looking at. In some of and you can see this in particular in the left-hand side chart, the countries on the left, including Thailand, China, Vietnam, and Malaysia, and Indonesia even. In some of the advanced economies and the well-established emerging markets of the region, the big challenge now is in fact population aging, which, as we know in Japan, has already led to lower nominal GDP growth and high fiscal costs. The main challenge for countries with aging populations will be to stimulate labor supply by promoting the participation of women and the elderly in the labor force, including, for instance, by expanding the provision of childcare facilities or increasing the retirement age. If we look at other economies in the region, the countries with the green columns, especially those of South Asia, we have a very different situation because these are countries with young populations and a high potential demographic dividend. For Bangladesh, the working age population is expected to peak around 2035, for India and Nepal around 2040. For those countries, one key priority to harness the demographic dividend will be to create adequate job opportunities in the formal sector. How do you do that? Beyond investment in physical capital, the governments need to focus on investing more in human capital, in particular education, upskilling, and measures to broaden access to education over life and vocational training in particular. Let me move now to the SDGs. So while there has been some considerable progress over these last years, notably with most ASEAN countries on track to eradicate absolute poverty by 2030, the region still faces significant challenges to achieving the SDGs and improving economic welfare. Moreover, income inequality remains elevated in most countries, and the shift towards manufacturing is having an impact on environmental sustainability. So regarding the likelihood of reaching the SDGs, one essential aspect is naturally that of financing, and this is where the IMF comes in general. So the IMF recently estimated the cost of making significant progress towards the SDGs for education, health, roads, electricity, and water and sanitation in 49 low-income countries and 72 emerging market economies. Based on that study, and this is in line with what Dr. Paipoli showed previously, our estimate is that the additional annual spending required to make meaningful progress towards those SDGs is for an amount of about $2.6 trillion per year. What does that mean? For emerging economies, this represents about 4 percentage points of their GDP in additional annual spending, while for low-income developing countries, the average additional spending represents about 15 percentage points of GDP. So you see the magnitude of the challenge. This calls not, first and foremost for the financial support of external partners from more advanced economies, especially for the low-income countries, but not to be forgotten, and perhaps most important of all, from a national ownership and sustainability perspective, is the mobilization of domestic revenue. I think Bangladesh is a case in point. While Bangladesh has achieved impressive economic growth and significantly reduced poverty, the low tax revenue GDP ratio does not allow for sufficient fiscal space to invest more in physical and human capital. So we believe that increasing the tax to GDP ratio by 5 percentage points of GDP in the next decade is an ambitious but reasonable target in many countries. Another challenge is addressing spending inefficiencies. That's critical, and strengthening macroeconomic management, improving governance, strengthening transparency and accountability, and fostering healthy business environments. Last point, I just want to address briefly the issue of climate change and shifting towards the use of renewable energies. As you know, the longer we wait before we address climate change, the greater the loss of life and the greater the damage to the economy. And the chart on the left illustrates the challenges of reconciling a fast growth trajectory, which calls for higher investment, and reconciling that with environmental sustainability. And this calls for an innovative approach to promoting green technologies based on the polluter pays principle and the reshaping of tax systems and fiscal policies. In the IMF's view, in the coming years, governments will need to increase the price of carbon emissions to give people and firms the right incentives to reduce energy use and shift to clean energy sources. Carbon taxes are the most powerful and the efficient tools, but they need to be implemented in a fair and growth-friendly way. And also carbon taxes need to be made politically feasible. So if governments raise additional revenue, they need to use that revenue wisely. Options include cutting other taxes, especially taxes that affect the business environment, and also they need to support vulnerable households and communities. Let me just say that taxpayer money from carbon taxes would also help save more than 700,000 people a year in advanced and emerging economies who currently die from local air pollution. And the money that could be raised from carbon taxes would also help contain future global warming, as agreed by the international community. Finally, governments need to adopt measures to support clean technology investments. These include power grid upgrades to accommodate renewable energy, research and development, and incentives to overcome barriers to new technologies. So pardon me for exceeding my time, but thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roger. Now going to the fourth speaker, Dr. Pedram Sultani, the Vice President of CACCI also. He has a very, very long, he happens to be a doctorate in medicine and done an MBA, and he speaks 6 languages. I just came to know. Huh? So let's hear from him now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I know that all of you must be tired, so I try to be quick in my presentation. I want to bring the discussion from the ground of data and statistics to the ground of skills and the chambers. And as a person who has worked with the chamber for so many years, and many of you have done the same, we should identify the role of the chambers as well as the private sector in realizing the sustainable development goals and sustainable growth. So I want to start, my presentation consists of 2 parts. The first part is a little bit about the function of the chambers, the history of the chambers, and the relation of the chambers with the community and the government. And the second part is a case study or a project which we have experienced and which we are doing in Iran. But before going to the presentation, I would like to say that sustainable, in my opinion, means a process which must be inclusive and participative. By these 2 words, I mean everybody, every part of the society, I mean the 3 parts, I'm going to that, should proactively identify and also does his own or her own function in the process of sustainability. So the capacities of the chambers, as you all know, I can categorize them into just a few categories. Chambers are a pool of the SMEs. That means they have the network of the SMEs. They have access to small and medium-sized enterprises which don't have enough resources in order to participate and in order to do their own task or role, even if they understand that in the process of sustainability and fulfilling sustainable development goals. They are a database of goods and services. So once the chambers want to deploy some goods and services to other projects, they can just easily understand how to do it. They are a source of entrepreneurs, and by saying entrepreneurs, I mean a pool of initiatives, a pool of talent, and a pool of creativity, which can come together and make doing projects on sustainability more creative. And we need actually creativity to be spiced up to the process of sustainability in order to bring it out of those bumps which are in front of the road. So they are also a collection of expertise, and they are also a network of the chambers all around the country and all around the world, which can learn from each other or which can work together for bigger subnational, national, or regional projects. I have prepared a video, but I think the video must be played over there. It gives you a very short information about the history and the track record of the chambers throughout the 4 centuries that the chambers have evolved. Please watch the 3-minute motion graphic, and then I'm going to continue. How can we play the motion graphic? Maybe from there. Because I don't have a play. No. No, you should just play it. If you just... It doesn't have any... maybe it's here. Huh? No. I've given it to you also another separate file, if you can just play it from there. I've given the motion graphic also separately. But it has a voice, yeah? The voice is not there. Just push them.
Chambers have passed 3 generations so far since their inception. Chambers in their first generation were mainly focused on maintaining private sector's relations with the government in order to create a better business environment for their members. The first generation of chambers could be labeled therefore as government-oriented chambers. Some of the main areas of focus of the Chambers 1.0 were trade and tariffs, taxation, labor issues, investment climate, and deregulation. In other words, the first generation Chambers' mission was to decrease business adversities for their members. The second generation of chambers could be called as member-oriented chambers. At the dawn of the 20th century, chambers realized that they could employ their abilities to provide more services to their members. They started issuing certificates of origin, authenticating commercial documents, dispatching trade missions, organizing business networking events, and giving training and education courses to their members. So the second generation chambers, Chambers 2.0, concentrated on building and increasing members' capacities. Since 1970s onwards, and following the development of corporate social responsibility concept, pioneering chambers started the evolution to the third generation chambers. As the representatives of the private sector, they deemed to be more responsible for the overall negative externalities of economic activities. So the third generation chambers became society-oriented. On this path, society-oriented chambers, Chambers 3.0, executed some initiatives. Some of them focused on CSR promotion, some partnered in environmental campaigns, others delved into youth enabling or women empowerment projects, and many others appeared more frequently in charity activities.
All right, so I think you have got a general idea about the evolvement of the chambers throughout these 4 centuries. So the modern chambers, or I would say the up-to-date chambers, now are community-oriented. That means they not only render services to their members, but to the whole community. And I had put a question mark on what the next generation of chambers would be, and that is the globally oriented chambers. We all know that the the scale of the problems and the conflicts and the issues which we have, they have grown all over these years, so that issues like sustainable development goals have been defined to tackle with those issues which are actually threats for the whole world, for the one world we have, not only for a single city or a country. So that now we are just confronting with a bigger scale of the challenges, but don't actually know how to cope with them and how to manage them. So the conventional way of the governance in each country is a form of a hierarchy, is a pyramid on which the government stands on top, and the civil society and private sector are on the bottom. So commands used to come top down and demands used to go bottom up. So this relationship has brought the current situation which we have. What we should do in order to realize and in order to fulfill our mission for the Sustainable Development Goals is to try to reinvent the form of the governance in the countries. From the hierarchical model of the governance, we should go to a kind of network governance, where the government sits at the core of the network, and the tasks and responsibilities will be distributed between the government, the civil society, and the private sector, and everybody feels or takes himself responsible for the challenges of the society, of the country. So now, as Mr. Goodmanson correctly mentioned, one of the main challenges of reaching to the Sustainable Development Goals is how to finance them. We are in a world that there is a conflict between the government policies. From one side, they want to gather as much tax as possible. From the other side, they are competing with the other countries for the betterment of the business environment. And then they are giving some tax exemptions. So these two policies are conflicting. What to do for that is just to change the form of the governance, so that the contribution from the community and from the society also will add up to the funds of the government, so that they can accelerate the pace of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that means in this form of the network governance, all three parts of the society are the players of sustainability. And that is what has been put in the centerpiece of the 17 SDGs instructions by the UN. By this concept, I will go to the case study and to what we have done in Iran. And I'm short of time, sorry, but we thought that we should learn from things which are the track record of the chambers, as well as we should put into the skills and the abilities of the private sector and the chambers in order to define a project which is participative and inclusive. We defined the project by the name of My Iran Campaign in order to build 100 schools in less developed areas and mostly remote areas of Iran. All of them primary schools, because we learned from the World Bank that the effect of primary education is more than double of the tertiary education in growth. So then we started to build 100 schools. By the time we reached halfway, we received some calls from the teachers or from the locals saying that they need some fixing in their schools, or there are some problems there. So we realized that still a piece of the puzzle is lacking. What was that? That was that they didn't have the sense of ownership on the schools that we used to build for them. So we just modified the model. We went to a remote village. We sat with the villagers over there. We listened to them. We learned about their pains and needs. First, we started to give them some facilitation in order to remove some of those changes, some of those issues. And also, we selected a courageous architecture for building a school which could be also a tourist attraction for the village. By that time, we got to know about the skills and abilities of the village. So there were some kind of needlework which was previously done by women there, but they stopped doing that. So we gathered them all together. They started doing the needlework again. Just the colleagues, they created a page on Instagram for them, and the page has currently more than 40,000, 50,000 followers, and they are selling those needlework, and 100 women out of 250 women there are working in this startup. And that is a village startup. And more than 10 of youngsters, they are doing the marketing and the procurement. So through that, they were able to contribute in building that school. 15% from the budget of the school came from those poor villagers. And also we got some share from the government and from the private sector. And we started just rectifying the problems they have in the sanitary system, and also just teaching them some skills, and then building the school. Now the village has been completely changed from a hopeless group of people without any skill, with bad situation of hygiene, and with miseducation and lack of a school. It has been an example in the country. I've run out of time. I'm so sorry for that, but I just wanted to say that we should identify the role of the chambers, the role of the private sector. We should sit with the civil society. We should sit with the government. We should try to reinvent the governance model of the country. Otherwise, we cannot fulfill the SDG goals or any other coming challenges in the future. Thank you very much.
Now we have the last speaker from Bangladesh, Mr. Ashish Gopal. He is the Managing Director of Marico Bangladesh. Please go ahead, sir.
Good evening and salam alaikum. For last 10 minutes, I'll try and give a perspective from the corporate sector, and my presentation I'll request you from, it's a thought starter rather than a point of view. So first thought starter is basically when you think from a private sector, we always think of a corporate social responsibility, and the question has come to a status wherein private sector now need to ask whether it is a responsibility or it's a necessity. If you understand the history of mankind, starting from a stone age to era of civilization without a leader, to a monarchy, to era of colonialism, and a vibrant era of democracy, we are living in best of the time. If you see last 30, 40 years, the time which we are living in is one of the best. Life expectancy has increased, poverty has reduced, the gap between developed and developing nation has gone down. In fact, Bangladesh is one shining example of such progress. Number of countries growing 5% in last 30 years, vis-a-vis last 100 years, is much higher from a few to many. And one or two particular thing which is constant, which is driving this particular change, is one is more democratization of information, more democratization of opinion, people having more right to express their opinion and freedom. And two is that countries are growing inclusively. The divide between societies is narrowing. Divide between countries is narrowing. And that is a prominent feature which is prompting us to say that we are living in one of the best time which probably humankind has experienced. In that context, what we need to ask ourselves is that if we want to give a better future to ourselves and our future generation, it is not a responsibility of growing inclusively, it is a necessity. And with that, as an organization which is operating into many countries, we believe that the business of business is more than business. Only profits cannot be the objective of firm. It has to be more inclusive growth. And at Marico, we believe that it is the responsibility of corporate world to contribute towards a sustainable growth in country and in the areas which we operate in. The second pertinent question which some of my colleagues asked, is it only responsibility of government to drive the change? And the answer is no. Because when you say it has to be inclusive growth for our beneficiaries, and from the angle of driving change, it has to also be a growth which is fundamentally rooted in partnership. And in that context, corporate sector has to play more and more active role in terms of creation, monitoring, funding, and driving the change in the society. With the same philosophy as an organization, we believe that a purpose which gives meaning to our existence as an organization is to make change in the lives of people we touch, to transform surrounding in a most sustainable manner by nurturing and empowering the people we touch for maximizing their potential. We believe that we are a consumer company. We work with consumers. We work at a ground roots. In say Bangladesh, we go to around 1 million outlets. We talk to people, we meet consumers. Our understanding of consumer society and the changes which are seeping in at a ground level, if incorporated in developing a model, we can create a far, far winning model. Globally, as an organization, we are aligned with education, community sustenance, healthcare, and most importantly, for any growing country, fostering innovation. Because we believe the next level of growth for our developing countries will only come via innovation. As a corporate which is more responsible and which wants to grow in a more sustainable manner, we are aligned on these following areas, which is responsible consumption of resources, responsible contribution towards climate change and reducing the impact of negative climate activities, sustainable supply chain, production which is responsibly and sustainably, community development, which is with our program of farmer outreach, and most importantly, driving diversity in your workforce. In Bangladesh, we are living our purpose by making a difference in unlocking the human potential. We believe that it is extremely important that we create infrastructure in the country which can take country towards a future generation. And I really love some of the sentences which Honorable Advisor has spoken about in terms of education, in terms of as basic as right to get books, in terms of as basic as right to get electricity, in terms of as basic as driving diversity. And in many of those areas, Bangladesh is a shining example, especially in the area of diversity. If today RMG success is there, it's primarily standing on the area of diversity because both men and women are contributing equally towards that sector and the growth of that sector. In Bangladesh, we are working with a flagship program of SOPNO. It is in collaboration with UNDP and Honorable Government of Bangladesh. Currently, the impact we are already working, impacted around 9,000 women in the areas of Satkhira and Kurigram. We intend to touch the lives of 65,000 ultra poor women with a secondary beneficiary of 260,000 surrounding families and a coverage of around 1,000 unions around 22 districts. In this endeavor, we identify ultra poor women, we equip her with a life training and assured wages for certain amount of time. From that wages, she saves some money and create a rightful living wherein after the program ends, she can create a future for herself. In this endeavor, it is not about giving charity. It is about giving a respect and a respectful living to that woman wherein society, because of her poor status, were denying her that respect. It is making her stand on her feet so that she can create a sustainable livelihood for her family. Second program which we are working in Bangladesh is a program of Adammo. Here again, with living with our principle of making a difference in the lives by unlocking potential, we are enabling a training to a differently enabled people by giving them a professional training so that they can seek employment with that training and again stand on their own feet. In this endeavor, we have also partnered with a couple of private organizations like BRAC, Bikash, and I'm really thankful for these organizations coming in with us and partnering in our journey, wherein we can give that rightful and self-respected living to people who were neglected in society earlier. I already spoke about it. So a couple of thought starters once again. How can a private sector contribute towards SDG? As I said earlier, we can co-create, develop, design programs which can drive the changes, which can have an impact at a ground level. Capital stewardship is expected from a corporate sector. Partnership beyond monetary contribution in terms of fulfillment by active participation of members. Just to give an example, in our Adammo program, we have encouraged our members to go and design programs such as merchandising, giving voice for a call center, helping them and training those people by going on ground. Now, at one level, we were empowering those people to get sustainable living. At other level, members of Marico were fulfilling the purpose of their existence by contributing towards society and still working in the job. Many of the organization doesn't give that option, but this is a great example that how can you work and still contribute to a society and create a meaning for organization as well as your existence. We can help SDG and especially a social sector in terms of monitoring process, build an effective mechanism around it. There is also a point wherein how social change and where will funding come from. Taxes is one particular avenue, but we believe we also need to see from the competitive lens. While we can have the parallel mechanism wherein more and more corporate sector can be encouraged to contribute towards SDG goals, and there can be incentive towards corporate for contributing that. That is a more sound, sustainable mechanism so that you don't lose your competitive edge as a country. And most importantly, there has to be a heightened awareness with sessions like this. We already pledged 1% of our profits towards SDG goal in Bangladesh. And we are committed towards taking those profits from 1% to 2% in recent time. And that's a committed for a country, that's a commitment for unlocking the potential in a country which we are operating in. A small glimpse of a video which I want to share with you. There's a video out there.
At Marico, we believe that an organization must have a purpose, which is much beyond profits. We strive to transform in a sustainable manner the lives of those we touch by nurturing and empowering them to maximize their true potential. Globally, the key initiatives aligned to our purpose are community sustenance, healthcare, education, fostering innovation. In Bangladesh, we are bringing alive our purpose of making a difference with Shopno by unlocking the potential of underprivileged women with livelihood skills and employability, and Odommo by empowering differently abled youth with the right skills.
আমার 15 বছরে বিয়ে হয়েছিল। আমার তিনটে বাচ্চা, ছোট বাচ্চার বয়স যখন 2 বছর তখন আমার স্বামী লিভার ক্যান্সারে মারা গেছিল। আমি খুব কষ্ট করে দিন গেছি। আমার লোকের বাসায় কাজ করতাম, ক্ষেত ফন্দলে কাজ করতাম। মাইকে প্রচার করলো যে স্বপ্ন প্রকল্প কাজ আইছে 2 বছরের। আমি ওই কথা শুনি পরিষদে গিয়েছিলাম, মানে লটারি হলো, লটারিতে আমার নাম বাঁধলো, এই বলে আমার কাজ দিল। 6,000 টাকা নিয়ে আমি ব্যবসা শুরু করলাম। এখন এই কাজ উঠে গেছে, আমার 95,000 টাকার মাল আছে আমার দোকানে। মেরিগো বাংলাদেশ ইউএনডিপি ও স্বপ্ন প্রকল্পের মাধ্যম থেকে আমার জীবন বদলাই দিয়েছে। আমি এখন খুব সুখী, খুব খুশি। আমার নিজের জন্য, আমার পরিবারের জন্য আমি এখন সুন্দরভাবে স্বপ্ন দেখি।
With Odomo, we have made a beginning with specially abled youth getting jobs in private sector.
Yeah, thank you so much. With the paucity of time, I need to stop it. But that's all from my side, and thank you for being patient listener.
I think the five brilliant speakers have covered many points which has been very illuminating and enlightening for all of us. They have covered from different perspective, and they are from different countries, and they have given their observation from their side and also shared their views. I think this is very, very, very important subject that we are talking on. Just if there is any question you like to have from the team here in front of me, any questions you like to raise? Maybe one or two, maximum two questions I'll take. Please identify yourself, please. Is the mic there? Please, can you provide the mic? And please tell the question is directed to each speaker also, if you can.
Good
Yeah,
evening.
Madam, I have already asked him to, please. After
Hello.
this.
Brian O'Gallagher, Chamber of Commerce, Northern Territory, Australia. It's more to the whole panel. I believe what we've been talking about this afternoon is really important. But it's also about diversity and about how the chamber movement can move on. And I think there is a challenge, because if you look across the room, most people across the room are my age or older. They're in suits, they're in ties. But the business community has moved on. So my challenge to the panel is, when we get to the 34th CACCI conference and we have the same panel, is it possible, or is it a vision to have, we could have two youth entrepreneurs who are CEOs, who are developing businesses in the digital age and so on, and very highly successful? Could we also have two female CEOs who are highly successful across the nation, the world, as well as ourselves and distinguished guests like yourselves up there as well? Because I think we've, as a chamber movement, we've got to start representing the broader business private sector community. And we keep talking about it on slides, but we don't actually see it in the people represented. So there's a challenge for CACCI. And it's a positive suggestion, because I think our youth and our female business community are just as valid as everyone else, and they need to be represented on the stage like everyone else. Any comments? Thank you.
Would anybody like to take up the question? Yeah, I think, Madam, yes. First we take the questions, then we'll answer together to save the time. Huh?
Good evening. I am Dr. Firdausi Begum, a scientist and also entrepreneur. I was held in the meeting. So I'm just asking one thing, that I'm supporting what he said, that next 34th CACCI meeting, we must invite young and successful entrepreneur. Should be. I am fully agree with him. And now my question is this: our very respectable secretary and also coordinator of SDG, Dr. Abul Kalam Azad said that we are very successful in our country's SDG goal that the primary education of girls, health, and the other sides also. And Iran also shows Sultanis showed their girls' education. And I've seen some of the SDG program in Indonesians. So in girls' education, the dropping, you have experienced. I'm working in the villages with the farmers. So I have some experience that they enter into the school, but in the after the primary school, the dropping percentage is coming out that time. Our government is very much concerned about it, about the dropping out. But I want to know that the other countries, that they have any study or any data of dropping out the after primary education of girls' educations. And next, I have one question to IMF.
Can you make the question very short, please?
And the last one, that IMF showed all the countries, datas, but I don't find the Bangladeshi's one. He's shown the Asians, different countries, even in India, but I have no any data from Bangladesh. So can you explain that? Thank you very much.
I'm just taking two questions. So anybody from the panelists would like to take up this question? By the way, just to tell you that we have a differentiation for the youth also. They have tomorrow, I think, for the young entrepreneurs, the session is there anyway. Mr. President, you'd like to say something, sir?
We have several sessions tomorrow with female entrepreneurs, just to let our friends from Australia know. And also the earlier session that you had, we had a young entrepreneur from Hungry Naki, which is a web-based food delivery system. And the whole team there is relatively younger is probably not the right word, relatively younger CEO. And also tomorrow we have one of the version of Uber CEO here who would be speaking as well. So tomorrow, we have a very mix of experience, seasoned leadership in government executives, corporate executives, and chamber leadership, as well as up and coming ones, including females, who represents about 50% of Bangladesh's population. So just for your information, our friends from Australia. And next time we would like to see more participation from our Australian delegates, with the woman delegates member when you come next time around as well as the young ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any of the panelists would like to take the questions? Just a very short one, sir.
Just to responding his question and suggestion. A few months back, once I was requested to participate in a panel discussion like this. I could have the opportunity to look into the name of the panelist. I find no women is there. So I told, if I participate this panel, that is not fair, because my boss, Prime Minister, always encourages the women to be there. So I declined to be there. Then they discussed with so many women, and finally they got one lady so that she could participate. This is very much always we need to look into the participation of women, so that they get encouragement, and always if we share with women, we get better ideas. Thank you.
Dr. Pedram, please.
I'd like to see the issue you raised from another perspective. We all know that each business and industry has a life cycle. Chamber is also a business. Chambers also have a life cycle. I showed the evolvement of the chambers over time. Now chambers are perceived by the youth as a traditional or old-fashioned kind of business organization. We also should reinvent the business model of the chambers so that we can make them more inclusive, so that the youngsters will become more willing to become our members. Now, you know that we have junior chambers of commerce all around the world. So they have created their own organizations by the name of the chamber, because they didn't, they were not allowed to enter into some of the chambers. I have an experience in my own country. And then they separated themselves. So we should reshuffle the model we are gathering, and we are just sitting with each other in the chambers. We should make them more inclusive. Sustainability is not only about those goals. It is about also our form of the organizations like the chambers. So we should make also the chamber model also more sustainable. Oh, yes.
Yes, first of all, to wholeheartedly agree with the suggestion to have more diversity on panels, but also more diversity and participation in economic life, I think. And from that sense, and coming back to the question on Bangladesh, I didn't refer to Bangladesh specifically because I was asked to cover all countries in the region. But I think, you know, there is a key issue of participation of women in the labor force in Bangladesh, which is considerably lower than for males. And I think there are maybe two important priorities in that regard. That's access to education, but not only primary education, mostly secondary and vocational education, and the acquisition of skills that are important for integration into the formal labor market. Then another very important issue is access to finance. And access to finance is not only about microcredit, it's access to formal credit through the banking system, where you can have more capital, more expertise, more support from corporate advisory teams. That type of access to formal financing mechanisms is, I think, a major challenge still for women. And I think, you know, what's interesting to note in the case of Bangladesh, Bangladesh achieved major successes in integrating women in the labor force, especially in the RMG sector. You know, the development and the growth of the RMG sector in Bangladesh owes to the participation of women in this sector. I think a worrying trend is that as we see more automation in the sector, we see that the participation of women in the RMG sector in Bangladesh has been declining. And that's an indication, maybe, that these women either do not have access to the supervisory jobs or to the acquisition of some of those skills that are relevant in a world where automation will become increasingly important. I think this highlights some of the challenges that we face moving forward.
I give some supplement from Australia. You know, that's my presentation that mentioned as, you know, the SDG implementation is they have spent 3.3 up to 4.5 trillions. You know, the ODA money that come from the, you know, the OECD, DAC, including the emerging, that's the 180 billions is still a big gap. And I mentioned that the 3.6% for the, you know, for private sector involvement, it could be the hope for the SDG implementation. So just, you mentioned the entrepreneurs, it could be the good opportunity part. But, you know, when we take into account all of that, mentioned that eventually still the capacity building, you know, for developing world and the developed could be have no difficult task. But in developing world, for instance, the financial part, also the data collection and the data analysis could be, you know, have a big problem task. So that the capacity building, you know, for the young generation, through the education, also the that create many opportunity for the young people, even the women, including us. Thank you. That's
I'll answer the last question. And as I promised that I will bring in a different perspective on the thing of girls getting dropped out from the school. See, any outcome is fundamentally driven by the belief. And we believe because we work with the consumer and there is statistical data which proves that the education of a mother is linked to the progress and the prosperity of family. More progressive, more educated is a woman, the progressive and a prosper is a family, because then your kids study well, there's a better financial management, there's a workload sharing from husband. So if that particular aspect needs to be changed, the belief surrounding that needs to be changed. There has to be a propagation of a belief that if a girl studies, she brings in the progress and the prosperity of family. And slowly things will start changing. Thank you.
I think the panelists covered most of the points, and the answers has been also well given. My observation actually, we are born, in this planet to live, not only to exist. And the gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening. And such forum like CACCI could be a platform to, harness the opportunities that we have with each countries, each nation, or individual, so that we network and not work, So you have to be networking in this platform to, share your ideas, views, opportunities. And there is a saying that one flower doesn't make a garden. So we have many flowers, So a one prosperous nation in a region is not going to make a difference, So we have to see the growth, the balanced growth is equally needed. So in order to make this world very happy, prosperous, sustainable, I think we have to work and believe on you. So there are challenges, there are opportunities. We live in a society where a lot of challenges are there with us, but it's up to us to tap the opportunities and fight the challenge. Nobody is born with everything. If you are born poor, that's your problem. But if you die poor, if you are born poor, this is not your problem. But if you die poor, then that's your problem, So the problem, I think, what I am trying to share with you is, everybody has the opportunities. But how do you tap that opportunities and harness for a betterment? When Mr. Abul Khan Azad shared his views and how this Bangladesh is, trying to graduate to a middle income group in next, couple of years, the process, the progress is something very exemplary. I think we have to learn also and also share our this type of feelings in our society. The thing that I could observe is this whole continent, this Asia Pacific is a habitant of more than half of the world population. And there are challenges, no doubt, but the opportunities are also equally there. So the 17 SDG of 169 targets, which was announced by the UN in 2015, despite of the progress that we have made in the last couple of years, I still feel that within the region, it's not really possible to achieve by 2030 unless we have to change the mode and the speed of our, the development. This country, in the process of globalization, the speed of modernization is so fast. Unless you cope up with this world, you will be left behind. It's an information highway, and one need to know at what speed you have to drive. And it's a one-way highway. It's not that people can return back from the same route. So there's a different highway for different routes, and the speed that is up to you to take it up. So we are in a period of a tremendous, change and challenges and opportunities too. And there is a significant shift from in poverty and inequality, climate and economic growth. Shifts are a separate phenomena. Inequality and injustice, so as poverty. Inequality is a close obstacle in achievement of the SDG. So my point is here that the SDG, to achieve that, it's all of us to have to put up your sleeves and work hard to achieve the target that we intend to meet. So without taking much time, I think we have already crossed the time. And I once again like to, I think let's give a big round of applause to the speakers here. I think this session has been quite interesting, and I'm sure you have been enlightened with the deliberation that they have made. And I'd like to thank the ABCCI for a wonderful session. Though it was the last session, to keep you awake and to continue with this was a challenging task. And on behalf of the chairman and me as Pradeep Shrestha, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to close this session.
Thank you, moderator and the speaker of the session. Now, to show our appreciation, may we request the session chairman, Mr. Pradeep Kumar Shrestha, to come forward and to do the honor of presenting tokens of appreciation to the speaker of this session. Mr. Shrestha, please. First of all, we may request our moderator to kindly present the token of appreciation to Mr. Abul Kalam Azad. Now, we may have our next speaker, Dr. Pai Po Lee, please. Now, our next speaker, Mr. Ragnar Gadmanson, please. Now, Dr. Pedram Sultani, please. May we have our next speaker, Mr. Ashish Gopal, please. Now, we would like to call Mr. Rajul Karim Riznu, Vice President of FBCCI, and Mr. Shujib Ranjan Das, Event Coordinator and Director of FBCCI, to present a token of appreciation to the session chairman. Thank you, everyone. That ends our third plenary session. We would like to invite all our registered delegates at the dinner at 7:30 p.m. at poolside. Thank you. To all our participants, thank you very much for joining with us today. Have a pleasant dinner.